Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Latest in Travel podcast by Guestcentric. I'm really excited to have with me today Alan Young, who is the VP of Hospitality Strategy at Infor. Alan is a seasoned business and technology visionary who is recognized for his provocative insights into how emergent technology impacts industries and how leaders can better connect with their customers for sustained growth. So first of all, welcome, Alan. It's really great to have you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's awesome to be here. And that bio mine makes me sound terrific. So maybe I need to tweak that a little bit, but it's good.
So thanks. It's really great to have you. And just so for people that don't really know like your background and stuff, do you mind just giving like sort of an introduction on what it is that you've been up to for the past years, how you got into this industry, and sort of your journey until today, and I guess how much the industry has kind of changed along with that as well would be interesting to know.
Well, gosh, if I go all the way back, so I'm Canadian, born and bred in Montreal. I lasted 3 months in university, so that was not my forte, and I probably had way too much fun in those 3 months, and thus I had to get a job. My father wasn't going to put up with me having that much fun. So my very first job, my brother luckily was working at a Four Seasons hotel, and there was a job opening for a person at the Vancouver property. So at the ripe age of 19, I think it was, my very first job was working as the minibar guy, taking a trolley full of liquor, knocking on every single door and restocking the minibar and writing it down on a chit. And then at the end of my shift, going downstairs and manually inputting every single one of those chits into the property management system to be properly attributed to everybody's folio. So that was, 42 years ago. 42 years ago. So 42 years, long time. But that's how I started. And I was in operations for the bulk of the beginning of my career. But I had a job at another Four Seasons years later where I got really interested in the computerization of our industry and how that affected the operations, how that affected optimization, how that affected our guest interactions, et cetera, et cetera. And I got really, really involved and excited about that. And luckily enough, I got headhunted out of operations in the hotel industry and went to go work for a technology provider. And that was probably 25, give or take, years ago, maybe a little bit longer. So since that time, I've been involved in hospitality and travel technology throughout my entire career, working on things, such initiatives as helping develop the schema for the Open Travel Alliance to connect all the airlines, hotels, CRSs, car rental agencies together to try to get to that single guest itinerary that I think our industry is still trying to get to, all the way through working with startups and working for my own business, which I've had for the last 10 years, and just left Puzzle Partner to join Infor again. And previously with Infor, I was there for a few years, 2010 through 2013, give or take, where I worked as the VP of Product Marketing and Product Management for hospitality, and then got promoted to be in charge of field marketing for all of Infor, and decided that I needed a little bit of a break from that. So started my own firm with a great friend, Ivana Johnston. But lo and behold, I'm 3 months in back at Infor, and I'm in charge of their hospitality strategy, looking forward into the future. So yeah, I've been around for a while.
That's really interesting. I have to say that in terms of like the college life, that was also kind of a similar situation with me. Although like I was just kind of like, I want to just start working. I don't care
Right.
like where I start, but it's always interesting to see like how the I don't know, evolution as a person, but then also like the journey. I'm sure lots of changes like happen in the industry like throughout. What would you say was kind of like in your journey, like the biggest like what made you kind of get interested in the technology side of our industry? I mean, I can guess that, like, you know, with your early operational experience, like having to manually input things, like maybe that kind of planted the seed, as it were. But were there any other things that made you like specifically choose technology?
I think it was the advancement of the online travel agency environment. When companies like hotels.com, et cetera, really started bridgeheading into the market, Travelocity back in those days, et cetera. That to me made it a very fluid and dynamic environment, and one that, you know, 25 years ago when this all happened, we all said, you know, travel agents are going to be gone. I remember being at a Focusrite conference with Philip Wolf, who was the chairman of the board of a few of the companies that I worked with. Great guy. And, you know, that was a really big topic of discussion. Were the OTAs going to basically push out travel agents? And obviously we haven't seen that happen. We've seen brick and mortars leave, but we haven't seen travel agencies per se get out of the game. So I think that was probably the biggest catalyst, because it changed the dynamic. Obviously, the internet changed it all, and being able to gather information as quickly and effectively as possible. But evolutionarily, I think it really is, you know, the advancement of how people interacted with the industry, not only at the property level, but now in the consumer environment, which to this day has yet to be mastered. So, you know, that was probably one of the biggest things that kind of made me go, this is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I guess like the OTAs were kind of the pioneers in the sense of like leveraging the internet wave and then kind of getting that distribution model up and running.
No
And
doubt.
yeah, and actually it's kind of it's interesting to see like sort of the next phase of that evolution, in the sense that, like, you know, when the OTAs came on the scene, you know, there were a lot of independent hotels and independent brands that, you know, they kind of got into the digital space like a lot later, and then, you know, kind of having to kind of launch their brands into the digital world and prioritize their brand and have their like actual independence and their direct business. So I think sort of drawing on your expertise as well in terms of like branding and also your experience like in the industry. Um, I think like something now, so the industry is changing and all of that. There's hotels, a lot of independent hotels have recognized, you know, that they need to have their visibility, you know, and manage their brands like independently. They still, you know, partner with OTAs, but, you know, they kind of have more of this balanced distribution, as it were. Although like there are others on the other side that will probably be like, okay, you know, it's a bit, you know, this internet, it's a jungle, you know, Google, SEO, all of that, you know, managing all of this is just too overwhelming in the day to day. So they kind of maybe relinquish, you know, maybe work with like other agencies or other things to kind of manage those processes. And then they can focus on, you know, on their guests, you know, like in the actual property experience. So I guess my question that I would like to put to you on this is, in today's like environment, is it how important do you think, in your view, is it for like independent hotels to kind of maintain that autonomous management of their brand online? And what would be some effective ways for them to do that? That would kind of, I guess, not solve, but like, you know, with the operational concerns and sort of things like that, like how would they, what would be your recommendations for them to manage that?
Well, let's take it two parts. Let's talk about brand and let's talk about management.
Okay.
So let me ask you a question. What bands do you like?
What bands do I like?
Yeah.
So off the top of my head, I would say the Pixies.
Okay. So if you were to go to a concert and you would have the capability to buy one of their shirts with the, you know, the concert dates, etc., and the propensity to do that is pretty high if you go to see a concert of a band. When was the last time you saw somebody walking around with a Marriott t-shirt on? Never.
Yeah.
Never. So when you start working with the large brands, you become anonymous per se, like the massive brands, because there are really no true fans of big brands in our industry. You don't see people walking around with Hilton t-shirts or Marriott t-shirts or anything like that. But if you get into the boutique marketplace, etc., the proclivity to be able to brand yourself effectively becomes increased. And such that branding methodology needs to be focused upon. So if you're an independent hotel, you want somebody to be wearing your t-shirt. And it's funky because people go, hey, listen, I stayed at this really cool boutique property, independent property somewhere, and it completely differentiated who I am as a traveler versus the rest of the masses that go stay at a Hilton, Hyatt, or a Marriott. So independent branding, I think, needs to be top of mind. And in today's world, because everybody wants to be different, they want to be seen as independent. They want to be seen socially. Having the capability to build that independent brand is really pretty cool. And so that's hugely important. When it becomes, when you kind of move away from that and start dealing with the day-to-day mundane stuff of uploading rates, inventory availability, even if you have technology sitting there that helps you do this, it's still something that distracts you from building out that brand. And so if you have the capability to lean on somebody to assist you with those tasks, that's great. Not saying that you don't look at the world strategically, but those rudimentary tasks, if you have somebody to support you, that's awesome. If you have somebody to support you from a marketing perspective as well, to give you greater visibility, that's great as well. However, you've got to maintain that individualistic brand because you want fans of your brand. I believe that our industry has the capability to grow its fan base, but we have to be able to do that with new ideas and new thinking and new branding methodologies. And so I think that's it's twofold. You got to focus on everything, and focusing on everything is a bit of an oxymoron, but you've got to be able to take a good hard look. And if there are things that you can optimize or regulate or just throw them to another party to help you take off some of the weight, then so much the better. But always be focusing on your brand and how your brand's perceived.
And I guess to your point, I know we spoke like a little bit before this this discussion, but like using like, I guess, data to sort of also understand like where you sit and where you're because I think maybe the pitfall as well is maybe with some hotels that are concerned with the challenges is like they're maybe trying to they don't know like where to target exactly. Like I know I've heard like certain stories sometimes, where there's maybe targeting a different type of customer segment that is not really relevant to the experience that they're providing. So, if you're, I don't know, a really remote eco-friendly kind of hippie establishment and you're inviting these kind of really, I guess, like people looking for more luxurious experience, then yeah, it's a bit, it won't work.
No,
so I guess yeah, sorry,
especially if you're riding the wave of sustainability, right? And people, if you really want to be a property that focuses on sustainability, there is a niche there. There are people there that really will drive their business towards properties that focus on that. Not properties that tell you to save your towels for a few days, because that's not truly going to save the world, but properties that have put that circular economic environment in place for them to truly be sustainable. So yeah, I think it really depends upon niche and market, and the more data you can get, the more you can laser your approach as it relates to your marketing efforts, for sure.
And in your opinion, like how, I guess, what would be a way, like a good starting point for hotels to first develop their brand, come up with a way to manage it, but then also in such a way that the distribution side, it's like they're not just they're also using data to actually generate more of that direct or more of that profitable revenue, and managing all of those kind of components. Like, what would be your recommendations to, let's say I'm a new hotel, I'm about to open in some months or 6 months or something like that, and I need to, I kind of have a concept and this and that, but I want to put my brand like online, but then also grow that business. What would be your recommendations as like the starting points for that?
First, really come up with a great idea. And that's really hard in this day and age. But once that idea has percolated and it's ready to be thrust forth into the universe of hospitality, I think the challenge that they face is one of, how do I differentiate myself from the rest? And believe it or not, in this day and age, service is a massive differentiator. Because with the amount of, or lack of, resources that we have in the marketplace, people that just don't want to get into hospitality, or it's a stepping stone to something else, it's really hard to keep people and keep people motivated. So it sounds weird, but I think in the days of TripAdvisor, et cetera, where you get your TripAdvisor review badge, there really should be something along those lines of the delivery of service. And we were starting to lack that in the industry. And I think if you're branding yourself, you could go ahead and hop on one item and say you're going to do something better than anybody else. And then ride that wave as it relates to ensuring that you're getting visibility externally. Because if I say I'm a luxury hotel and I offer the services that give me, a certain star rating, et cetera, I'm lumping myself into a group of hotels that are very similar to who I am. So you've got to really take a look at which piece of that do you want to go ahead and amplify in order to differentiate yourself. And then from the same thing of creating content online, and as you know, we're doing this right now, but people are driving to video content faster than I've ever seen. And it's not sitting down and looking at a 20-minute YouTube video. It's sitting down and looking at a 10-second snippet of something, irrespective of where it's located. And if you have the capability to drive eyeballs to any kind of social channel where you're differentiating yourself and you're targeting your audience effectively, which you can do now, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, et cetera, those are huge mediums in which to be leveraged. And, I think trying to be as genuine as humanly possible too. I think people can see through salesmen per se that are trying to oversell and possibly will underdeliver. And so trying to get down to the basics of our industry, I think we've lost sight of that a lot of the times with the delivery of loyalty programs and people just traveling to get points and not to get service. And we've lost an element of genuineness in our industry a little bit at times. And so I think there's a huge opportunity for hotels to amplify that aspect of their business, that they're service oriented, that they genuinely care about you. And it's not just a vision statement, right? And those things. And once you kind of create that groundswell of interest, then you can let social kind of drive that for you, but you have to really focus on that. When it comes to the generic things like SEO and, keywords and all that stuff, I'm lost because there's just so much to do and so little time, and, trying to help you get somebody to do that for you if you can. Somebody who knows the ins and outs, because right now you need to be focusing on other things as an operator.
I really agree with what you said about service being a differentiator, and I don't know if you would agree, but like I think, and this is something that it's not just in our industry, but I've seen kind of reflected across multiple industries. It's like it seems, and it could be because people are kind of getting back to normal, and it is a lot better now than it was, let's say, last year or 2022, for example. But like since I guess the pandemic, it just seems, certain things, there's been challenges with like airlines, things like that. And I guess also, when and I'm not like saying this, as like a negative for technology, but I think like maybe this thing of like self check-ins and okay, let's try and move a little bit from that, but maybe more of the focus should be like leveraging technology to actually deliver that service and use that service as a differentiator. So I don't know if you agree with that observation or
well, part of my job is to kind of look into the future about what the interactivity is going to look like between the guest and the hotel. And we have got so much technology that surrounds our industry. It's phenomenal. And there's new stuff coming out every day. When I really look at the challenges that we face as an industry from an interpersonal perspective, it's that front desk interaction. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending upon how you look at it, there's so much data that can be gathered from the machines that we use, that we really rely on our employees to go ahead and punch as much information into those machines as possible. So the front desk environment is one of, heads down, and you say hello to the guest, and then you ask them for their passport and their credit card, et cetera, but all the time you're sitting there staring at a screen. And we've been doing that for years. I really have this utopian world of hospitality where there's no such thing as the computerization aspect of our industry. It's all interactive, where upon arriving at a front desk, because I think a front desk is a great greeting environment. When somebody arrives at your home, they just don't walk in, right? They knock or they ring the bell, and you open the door and you welcome them, and then they come in. And our industry still needs to be able to do that, but better than us pounding on a keyboard, all you have to do is say, hello, your name. And once you give the person your name, they say, Alan Young is checking in. And from there, everything's automated. Yeah. You give them your passport, but everything else is automated. So there becomes a communication protocol between the front desk employee and the guest, rather than something that seems very fragmented and disingenuous. So from that perspective, I think voice interactivity with our entire industry is the next phase, in my humble estimation. So we'll get rid of everything. And to that end, if I want to interact with devices, I can ask it. We're getting to a point now where voice recognition and the capabilities of voice recognition are getting very, very good, and they're making less and less mistakes. So with that, in combination with artificial intelligence and how it can gather other information to say in my ear that, oh yes, Alan Young's a VIP, make sure that you do this, et cetera, very similar to the way news is almost delivered, right? Things and people, they're talking and they're being fed. The same thing, however, there's not this piece of hardware that segregates the guest from the employee. And some of the best engagement models I've ever seen is I remember going to India and staying at a Layla property in Trivandrum, and there was no check-in process. They walked me down, they sat me down, they gave me a tea, they took my passport and all that, and came back and then gave me my room key and then walked me to my room, right? I didn't see a computer. All I saw were humans. Now, granted, that's super luxury, but we live in a technological day where all that can be true, from a super luxury hotel right down to a Motel 6. And so I think in the future, we want technology to advance that interpersonal human kind of touch element and not be a detractor. You will always have those people that don't give a crap and want to go straight to their room. They don't want to talk to anybody. They're on a work trip. They don't. Give them whatever they need. But for those people who don't know, who might be older, that don't really understand how to navigate technology effectively yet, all of these people that still want that higher touch, I think we have the capability within the next few years to take that big cumbersome PC out of the way, and for us to be able to interact with that in a voice recognition environment.
Yeah, and I would argue as well, even that even for those kind of profile of guests that just want to go straight to the, because I'm a little bit like that
Oh yeah.
personally, but if I do run into, like, I guess an issue, or there's something I need clarity on, I do prefer, I don't want to get directed to a resources page or to a bot. I want to speak to a
Yeah.
human that can help me with those nuances. So definitely, it has value to everyone, even if it's not all the time, but like there will be those occasions, and maybe that would change. I don't know, as technology continues to evolve, that it gets super intelligent, that it could solve those nuances. But for now, at least, I would say that is kind of the case.
It is the case.
Yeah.
I was watching a show. I'm trying to educate myself on quantum computing, which is in itself a daunting topic. But when we get to that point, virtually anything will be possible. But I think we still have a ways to go.
Yeah. And so you mentioned this hotel in India that kind of differentiated with their service, but are there any other, I guess, sort of examples that you can think of hotels that have really done this well in terms of differentiating themselves with their brand and really providing that unique experience where you would want to wear the T-shirt, I guess?
Well, the Relais Chateau properties do an incredible job, all of them, and they have guidance from that soft brand in order to assist them. You know, I've been lucky enough to have an older brother that's been in this industry for a lot longer than I have, believe it or not. And he runs a beautiful hotel in Newport, Rhode Island, and they do wear the T-shirt of that property, and it's because of the fact of that service element. I think we get challenged when we go down market, and when we go to a Hilton or a Hyatt in an urban center, where you don't get that anymore. And when you do get that, it's like, wow, it's like an aha moment. It's like, oh, I got back into hospitality. This is cool. So I would say that the areas where service is delivered the best is in environments where ownership cares about it, where management cares about it, and where the people care about it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be incentivized correctly to get to that point. You just have to create that culture. And so where that culture is created incredibly well is in the boutique space, because owners are very tight with those hotels. Unlike owners of a brand that just want to look at KPIs and want to see as much data and look at that more of as a real estate asset than they do as a hospitality business. So I do think throughout my experiences, the service amplification that I've received has been received primarily in the independent market, where they're not as regimented and the cadence is different and the cycles are different. So I think that to me is, can I pick out a whole bunch of hotels? Probably, but I think it's better to talk about a culture and people that buy into that culture, and that comes from the top down. And so Virgin does a really good job of it. I was lucky enough to be able to interview James Birmingham, who's the CEO of Virgin, last year for an event. And it really does come from the top down. Here's a guy who believes wholeheartedly in the industry. His roots are ma and pa, like he was working in a hotel during his early years, very, very early years. And he came up through the ranks. And even though Virgin has a really cool brand, they still can expand on their coolness by creating that culture. And James Birmingham has done that. So I think Virgin is a good example of that from a brand perspective.
And sort of like my final question, I guess, on this specific focus is, so we talked about sort of positioning yourself, knowing who your guests are, and using data to kind of talk the right language to the right people, I guess. But with, so obviously as things continue to evolve, technology evolving, the guest consumer demands change as well. There's like higher expectations in terms of service levels, efficiency, getting things done as easily as possible. What would be your advice, I guess, to hotels to kind of adapt to those changes while still, being true to the fundamentals and the core of like their brand, but then also evolving to meet these new demands and to stay on top of I guess the evolution of what consumers are wanting?
Well, don't adopt technology for the sake of adopting technology. Have a strategy associated with that adoption. Number one. Number two, guests are 20 times more challenging now than they were 10 years ago. And why? Because they know how to surf the internet. They know how to gather information. They know how to take a look at reviews. They know how to, do things much, much better than they did 20, even 10 years ago. So you've got to keep on top of that. People feel empowered because they now have a voice. If you have a crappy stay somewhere, you can scream it from the mountaintops. If you have a great stay somewhere, you also have that same capability. However, for some reason, I don't know why, people just have the capability to scream louder than they will when they're when they're angry, than they will scream if they're happy. And so there's a chance that you've got to really keep on top of your brand. And there are technologies out there to help you do that at a very rudimentary level, but still to that point, a standard response of sorry, we didn't meet your expectations. Please let us, give you a 10% off coupon for your next day, and we'll do our best. That's not going to do it. So you really have to go ahead and properly engage. So if there are technologies to help you do that, then that's great, but never lose that personal touch. So yeah, I think, and I keep harping back on it, it's being genuine. I think people can see through other individuals that aren't, and it's just part of people's DNA. I believe hospitality professionals, or even hospitality people in the front lines, they're really great ones. They're just really good at delivering hospitality. Irrespective of industry. If they were working in retail, they'd be great at it. If they were working, in a restaurant, they'd be great at it. Or as a housekeeper, they're great at it. I think it's part of people's DNA. So trying to find those people that have that as part of their DNA and bringing them along from a career perspective as part of your business goals, I think is incredibly important as well, outside of technology.
Yeah. I guess, it's staying true to that authenticity as well is important with.
It really is. There's a really cool guy that runs a show called the Independent Lodging Congress, Andrew, and he's all about being genuine, and his shows are all about being genuine and all about making sure that we're getting back to the grassroots of hospitality. Which is awesome. And so, not as much glitz and glamour, more discussions and intrigue about how we can do things better. But there's a huge community of people out there that really care about this industry, and so we should all get together and see how we can make it better. But unfortunately, because of competitiveness and all this other stuff, sometimes we don't. But associations, to me, are a great environment in which to try to move the ball forward, whether it's HSMAI or HEDNA or HFTP or HDNG or AHLA. The acronyms go on and on. But I think hoteliers that engage in that also see fruits of that labor. Even if they feel that they don't have time, they should make the time, because it's super important. It helps not only from just seeing what's going on in the world, but it also helps engage and learn from others, which is super important.
Yeah. So it's kind of like going to your point, I guess, a bit like what we spoke about a little earlier in this discussion about using data, like not only to understand sort of the customer side of things, but I guess also moving along to I guess, the business performance and actually focusing more on, I guess, profitable revenue instead of just, because I think sometimes the challenge is, it's kind of like, okay, we're selling nights and we're happy, and it's not really taking into consideration, okay, like uh, how much of this is going to the OTAs, how much is going to our direct channel, and it's just kind of just not looking at that too deeply. So I guess in your view, like, how would you say independent hotels should leverage data to make, I guess, smarter decisions in terms of their online distribution strategies, ensuring that they prioritize channels that drive the most profitable revenue, and not just revenue across the board without taking in the, I guess, the costs?
Yeah, well, revenue management platforms, of which there's a plethora of, are important. I think we did a survey, and I heard some number yesterday of 250 respondents, give or take. 33% of them use spreadsheets. So that's a problem.
Yeah.
But from that perspective, moving forward, data is, and this is not my term, but data is the new currency. So when you look at the industry at large, understanding what's going on is super important. Unfortunately, the way that we've learned how to understand the world is through reports. More reports and more reports and more reports. I want a pace report. I want a pickup report. I want a flash report. I want, an OTA distribution report by segment, by market, by you name it, right? We are inundated with reports. So the best way for an independent hotelier to really understand what's going on and not necessarily have to avail themselves to sifting through a myriad of reports is to start asking the report engine questions, or the engine itself questions. So in the future, in very, very near future, you'll see hotels be able to use a GPT interface very similar to ChatGPT, whereby through the utilization of an analytics and insights platform, some call them business intelligence, maybe a little bit bigger than that, where it's pulling data not only from your primary system, like a property management system, but it's pulling data from external sources, such as OTAs, such as CRS data, such as POS data, such as sales and catering data, where you'll start to be able to interface with a platform by asking it different hypothetical scenario questions. Like, if I was going to go ahead and move my rates by this amount, but I also have a booking of a group coming in over here, and I know that my restaurant's going to be running at 50% occupancy in the restaurant, how should I go ahead and apply resources effectively to all these locations, and how can I maximize my revenue? Da, 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 da. And from there, the platform will spit out its recommendations to you and what to do. At the same time, so you're talking about a hypothetical situation where you can type in the question you want answered. You can also type in the question that says, give me a pace report. And it tells you your pace report. We are mired in this vortex of stupidity when it comes to the reports that we have for our industry. And thus we haven't moved along the path to getting to a point where we're now utilizing the data in any manner, shape, or form that we want to. And because of the advancements of AI and the advancements of large language modules, and it's gotten to a point where now we can really do cool things as technology operators. And so we can give, how do I say this politely? Well, we can give people who aren't that technologically adept the capability to interface and interact with technology in the same way they would write, an email to a best friend. And so that, or text, probably emails are passe. So write a text to a friend in the same way that you can go ahead and ask any questions, whether it's related to your events side of your business, your room side of your business, your F&B side of your business. You're now able to interact with an intelligent platform and ask it any hypotheticals, what if scenarios, and it'll feed that back to you. So if you have that capability, the world is your oyster when it comes to data. And we're there, right? We are there now. So from that perspective, I think you'll see in the next 24 months the adoption of data analytics to be exponential, because it's not just about reports anymore. It's about interacting with the data. And there are technology providers out there, maybe one that I work for, that are doing this. And so an independent hotel can delve as deep into the data that they want to, or as lightly as they want to. And they don't have to be restricted by all of the different systems and all the reports that they spit out. So that's, to me, that's panacea for an operator.
That's very interesting. And when you say like it pulls sort of hypothetical scenarios, because I think the consensus that I'm kind of hearing more and more is like prior to pandemic times, it was kind of like, okay, historical demand patterns. But even before the pandemic, there was also more of this like focus and move of like, we need more real-time data. So when you say it pulls like hypothetical scenarios, I'm presuming that it's kind of based on, and apologies in advance for the terminologies I use, because this is kind of an area for me that I'm still working more and more to understand. But how does it pull kind of like that real-time information?
It'll take a look at what's from a perspective. It'll take a look at what's on the books. It'll take a look at what's coming in the future. It'll take a look at weather data. It'll take a look at Google Analytics. It'll take a look at feeds from OTAs. It'll take a look at feeds from TripAdvisor, and it will take a look at the primary systems that run the hotel. And so from that perspective, you'll be able to ask it many, many questions. Imagine, if you will, the capability, now this is a little bit out there, but the capability for personalization, which has always been a struggle for our industry. The only thing we do really well is, well, not even really well, is we tell the guest, yeah, we can put you on a high floor and away from an elevator, but other than that, we pretty well suck. So we have the capability with bringing external data feeds, whether they're structured or unstructured, into an environment, a data lake, where you can start pulling information from the data lake. And imagine if you have a LinkedIn feed that says Alan Young's coming to stay, and now you not only have Alan Young, but you have data from me, you have where I work, you have things that I may like, all of this information now within that data lake that an operator can pull from in order to go ahead and increase that personalization aspect of their visit. So, that to me is a little future. I don't think LinkedIn's going to give anybody an API anytime soon, but to that point, data about me is everywhere, right? So we do have the capability to pull that information into the data lake. So not only help you with profitability, i.e., where do I set my rates based upon all of these different scenarios that may or may not happen, and how do I optimize channels, right channeling and all that kind of stuff, which through a GPT interface becomes very rudimentary because you're just typing in that question, to where, how do I go ahead and expand my footprint branding wise on which channel should I use? Am I getting the most input or review content? Those kind of things will also be able to be utilized through what we call a hospitality analytics and insights platform. So yeah, it's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I could agree that would be that reality is something, I don't know, as someone that works in marketing, and it's like a thing, and it is like better obviously now than it was, like 5 or 10 years ago. But yeah, kind of consolidating everything together and just, a simple, okay, as you say, like interacting with the interface to get those answers, but very specific as well. So it's not like, okay, now I need to toggle this and change this on this dashboard and this and that. But if it's all kind of like, right. And I think also for me, like actually typing it out and asking it in words, I don't know, this is maybe an aesthetic thing, it's a bit easier for me to interact with in that way, and having it so efficiently laid out with pooling all those, I guess, data points or from different sources.
Well, yeah, imagine that the cool thing of, we talk about interacting or interfacing with platforms using voice, right? Which from a operations perspective will be the next step. Now in the back of house, or whomever cares about the data, now they have the capability to interact with the data utilizing just normalized language. So when you look at onboarding people, the worst thing about our industry is trying to onboard somebody, because you got to, not only do you have to train them on what service culture is all about, but you have to train them on all the systems that are being used, and and that and then there's a learning curve, etc. So if you can negate or just take all that out, where all these people really need to know is how to deliver exceptional hospitality, all they have to do is talk to the systems and type with the systems, and then everything else comes into play. Then we're just going to go ahead and make sure that people are just that much more efficient, and we can make them happier as employees, because to that point, they don't have to figure out what to toggle or what thing to click or whatever to get the data that they want. So yeah, we've got to make it a heck of a lot better than what it is. And that's kind of what our goal is at Infor.
And when you mentioned sort of, I guess, because you mentioned something earlier that I actually took a note of it, but like the single guest itinerary, would this kind of connects to that? Am I correct in making that?
Completely. If you can get the airlines and the other entities to play nice, but yeah, for sure, it's all about getting the data. As soon as you have the capability to take that data and have it sit in the lake that you're working with, then the sky's the limit. I remember back in I was lucky enough I was in Prague week before last, and I had dinner with an old friend by the name of Mike Kistner. And Mike and he was CIO of Best Western, and he became chairman of the board of Open Travel Alliance, where we were building all this stuff out. And we put together this perfect life of a traveler video. It's 11 minutes long, back in 1999, and I asked if he could send me the link. And it's weird how far we have not gotten from 1999 to now about that single guest itinerary, right? About really understanding, can I go here and make a change and do this and do that, but my itinerary follows me all around and everybody knows what's going on. From this perspective, the utilization of a data lake effectively should be able to help us get to that point more effectively. But once again, it all depends upon the data sources. You need all the data sources to make that happen. But yeah, it was really weird to sit down and talk about the old days and then talk about, oh my goodness, we really haven't come as far as we thought we would in 20 years, give or take.
But I guess even with airlines as well, with the alliances and so on. So if like doing a very long term, like a long haul flight, and then you have to change from one airline to another. Yep. I guess like before, it was kind of like, okay, make sure that I get to that as quickly as possible. And there was like, now it's definitely appreciate the value of it being more connected in that sense. If there's a delay with the one flight, you're not going to be stranded because you couldn't catch the other one. So
it's very, very true. Yeah.
And sort of another question I had, sort of based on what we were talking about now in terms of getting all those data points, what would be some specific ways, I guess, that this in the direction where like these, smart data strategies and pooling it's going, what would be some of the opportunities and ways that hotels could identify, I guess, opportunities to optimize their direct business? Like what would be some specifics in your opinion?
Well, I think, you just can't throw money at it. You've got to have the strategies again, but optimizing direct business starts on property from my perspective, and then, excuse me, layering on technology on top of that in order to give you data that you can act on. So for example, if I'm pushing out too much inventory on a channel and, it's just not working as well as I thought, you should go ahead and reallocate that inventory effectively at a rate that you know is going to be viable for that channel. So there's a lot of struggles that independent hotels about talking about driving more direct business because the OTAs are taking so much of a percentage, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, you can't necessarily dismiss that environment because it's the world in which we live. You just have to optimize it. And if you're able to create more of an interest in direct, then good for you. But it's not something that you turn the light switch on and go, oh, I'm going to increase my direct bookings by 50% in the next 3 weeks, right? It's an evolution. And to me, the more data that you have, whether it's from your CRS provider, whether it's from the property management system, sometimes it's taking a look at that data and understanding it more effectively and understanding what are the switches that you need to toggle on and off in order to get that profitability higher. So your technology partner is super important, not just to deliver the technology to you, but also to help you enable the technology as effectively as you can. So there are lots of ways that a hotel can do this, but I hearken back to the first thing. If you greet the guest upon arrival, there's a really good chance they're going to book with you direct next time. A really, really good chance. If you turn your back on them and try to get something while they're at the front desk, there's a pretty good chance that they're not going to come back. So rudimentary is the key. And then technology advancements, I think, is the secondary measure to make sure that you're doing the right thing. Applying the right product to the right price to the right channel, et cetera, at the right time to the right guest to the right whatever. That still holds true, but still, if you're operating a great business, people are going to know and they're going to want to book direct. Unfortunately or unfortunately, I think when you look at the next demographic that's coming up, which is we've had Gen X, Gen Z, Canadian, then there's the Gen Alpha group that are coming up next. And the Gen Alpha group will never have experienced any kind of brand awareness. Their brand awareness is all massive, right? Whether it's a gaming console or whether it's something that they watch on Twitch or YouTube, those are the big brands that they understand. So you also need to be very, very sure that you're engaged on those big platforms where Gen Alpha now is residing, because it's going to get harder and harder as people bury themselves in their mobile devices to become unique. So that's going to be the next challenge that hoteliers face, is that next generation that has been completely brought up with this and know nothing else.
Yeah. And I think actually this is a good opportunity to kind of, and I think this is maybe part of the challenge in our industry sometimes, is with all the technology that's available and things, evolving and new solutions like coming up and all that. I guess if I'm a hotel and I want to invest in what is right for my business and what will actually propel my business forward, what would be your recommendations on what should hotels consider before sort of investing with their with technology partners to kind of bring their business forward in that sense? And obviously it's a bit difficult to say because on a case by case basis, things are different. People will have different needs. But would you say there's a starting point on questions that the parts of the business that should be evaluated before making that step or that investment?
Yeah, I think there are definitely parts of the business themselves that should be evaluated to make sure that it's working hard. And it's, where am I going to go ahead and expose my inventory? That's probably number one, because that's the world in which we live. Secondarily is what kind of human capital tool am I going to put in place? How am I going to ensure that I created a culture, and is there a technology that will help me do that? I know you said not technology, but sometimes it's good, because when you want to get people in and you want to hire people, unfortunately, you just can't throw it up on, here we have something called Indeed, which is a website. You just throw all your listings up and you get a crap load of resumes back, and none of them which are applicable to the job you posted. So you've got to really have a strategy there. But I think it's also really important to invest in people. Your management team is your lifeblood of your business. And if you invest in them, in their education, so they become more effective leaders, et cetera, I think that's hugely important for a hotel brand. If you're a truly independent hotel, then you want to take a look at soft brands as well. Can a soft brand help you? Can they help you with some of the marketing that you require, et cetera? Can they help you increase your visibility a little bit better than putting a Marriott flag on your business? Those things I think should be looked at. But yeah, at the same time, it's rudimentary. Hire the right people, offer them the chances to grow, and make sure that you've got great managers in place that understand that for those in hospitality, it's part of our DNA. For those who are not in hospitality but want a job, you've got to help create that and help plant that into their DNA. So you got to have the right people that will go ahead and drive that business forward. I'm going to mangle my metaphors. I love doing this, but it's not rocket surgery. If you do the right thing, you're going to get the right responses, right? If you hire the right people, if you build your brand correctly, if you look at it strategically and tactically, if you do all the right things, you're going to get the right results. It's not that hard, but at times we tend to focus on things that aren't necessarily the right thing to do. So that to me is my mangled metaphor for the day.
And when you say like hiring the right people, like, so obviously I think, with technology kind of cutting out more of like the manual repetitive tasks,
Mm-hmm.
would you say that it would maybe, because you mentioned earlier, and I guess this is a challenge like with staffing and like the shortages and things like that, and making the industry more desirable, as it were. So people are kind of like, I actually want to get into operations and I want to make this a long-term career. How do you see like technology having a role with that? And like, do you foresee like new, I guess, sort of positions popping up, in the next few years that we haven't seen previously?
There'll be lots of positions that pop up. It's interesting. McDonald's, that's everywhere. They thought when they put kiosks in that they were going to be able to alleviate some of their labor woes. And that didn't happen because humans, we kind of said, okay, we'll work on a kiosk. That's not too hard. I can look at a picture of a burger and press plus, right? I can do that. So what happened was they had an influx of business because it created a faster turnaround for people actually ordering, because when they were standing in front of a terminal, that person behind the terminal was a detractor to commerce. They were slowing things down. And when they put the terminals in, the touch screens, it actually sped things up. So now they needed more people to expedite. They needed more people to cook. They need more people to expedite. And it created jobs rather than got rid of them, which is kind of like, wow, what happened there? So I don't think it's going to be the like for like, because the hotel industry is not, quick service restaurants. But at the same time, I think you'll have people that are going to be much more service oriented in their job. You're going to have people with service positions within their title, because that'll be it. You'll have people that will be doing, AI stuff that'll be in their title, creating content for the website, being that prompt engineer for a hotel, etc. You'll have that. And I also think you'll have people that will be a little bit more data oriented, that an independent hotel doesn't have today. You'll have that data strategist that will be able to manage all of the inputs of data and be able to show people how to use it effectively. And for those management people that didn't want to, we'll be able to go ahead and act as that human interface with that product or that platform. So yeah, I definitely think there'll be new positions opening. And if luck has it, there'll be more positions required than currently we have in a hotel right now, much to the chagrin of an operator.
Yeah, I have to agree. And actually, it's funny because I don't know, like I used to work in recruitment and stuff, and it's something I've heard. You know, there's always sometimes this gloom and doom hype, like AI is going to steal jobs, and this is going to, the jobs are going to go down because it's eliminating this but I guess what maybe some people don't realize is or don't think about in the moment is kind of, yeah, with these evolutions, there will be new issues that arise or new I don't want to say problems because that sounds like negative, but new demands or new things that will then create that opportunity or that vacancy that will need to be filled, or that role to be filled. So yeah, very interesting, and it will be interesting to see how it evolves on this front. For sure.
I'm more excited about our industry now than I have been in the last 30 years. I really believe that our industry is, outside of macroeconomic issues and politics and crap like that. Outside of that, our industry is really at the precipice of something fantastic. And we've always said that technology is going to help us advance the industry, and yes, it will. But I think you're going to see a really cool mashup of service and technology in the future that we haven't seen before, where we're going to meet where we're finally going to be able to meet guest expectations. And if that guest expectation is, I don't want anything, just let me go in my room. Or if that guest expectation is, I want you to know that I want a spa, pedicure at 4 p.m., right? We'll be able to meet those expectations as well. So I think we're really at a time where our industry is very, very cool. So There you go.
Well, yeah, it's definitely exciting. And I think now sort of getting to more excitement, I guess, looking to the future and sort of the trends. And I guess a question I would like to put to you, and you did mention like a few, I guess, like ways that the industry is potentially heading. But what would you say are your like top predictions for our industry within the next 5 to 10 years? That you can foresee happening that will be significantly impactful.
Well, it's funny. The older I get, the wiser I get. Not necessarily smarter, but being able to predict 5 or 10 years out is problematic these days because things move so quickly. But as I've said, I think the way that we interact with technologies as operators, frontline resources, et cetera, will change dramatically. I think it'll become much easier for us to interact with technology at every level as a hotel operator, owner, manager, et cetera. So that's for sure. I think, and I've said this, and I think some people have kind of said, well, yeah, maybe. I think there'll be a new segment, which will be autonomous hotels, where there is no one except security and maybe a few people to help you out, where everything else is outsourced. So for those people that just want a room in Manhattan, that don't want to be, wined and dined, there will be things like that. It'll basically be like a big, massive Airbnb with housekeeping. So I think that type of market segment will come up. I know that I've talked to a few management companies about this concept, and because management companies are all about profitability, they go, "Ooh, that's interesting because it doesn't need any people, and people will just give us money." So that sounds interesting. And then hopefully we'll get to a point where our likes and dislikes are met. So we tend to look at the capability of what we can deliver to people, but we also have to look at what they don't want. So I think that will be part of the equation. And then if we can get everybody to play nice in the sandbox, airlines, car rental companies, everybody else and their brother, we may get to a point of that single guest itinerary that follows me and my journey everywhere, and that everybody knows about, if I give them the capability to do so. Privacy will be a huge concern moving forward. It's a bigger concern in Europe right now than it is here in Canada, but it's increasing. But with that, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you want levels of service, if you want people and hotels to be able to deliver that level that you're looking for, you've got to be able to give up some of your privacy. So that I think will be a bit of a conundrum, right? It's crazy when you look at your own credit report every once in a while and where everything's going on, and you go, "Holy cow! How do they remember what I did in 1979?" But that's there. So the same could be true of don't be surprised if companies know more about you than they think to do. They think that they do. However, if you give them capabilities to know more, they'll be able to deliver more. And we're always being asked by that for any kind of online, whether it's Amazon, right? It's like, pick these ones or pick those ones. They're pretty scientific on the next thing they're going to deliver to us. But if I buy toilet paper on Amazon, which I do, go figure, I don't need more ads about toilet paper.
Yeah.
So there is a challenge with the algorithm, right? But yeah, I think privacy will be huge. I think technology interaction will be huge. I think there might be some market segments that we never thought about before that may rise to the top. But I'm really hopeful that service and authenticity is still at the bedrock of what we do, and hopefully that will percolate to the top as well. And we treat our employees incredibly. We try to treat our employees as best as we possibly can. And if I had my wish of all wishes, I'd love to see our industry get to a living wage for our frontline employees, where we know that it's not. And we've spent the last 2 years as an industry reaping the benefits of pent-up demand. But at the same time of reaping those benefits of pent-up demand, we should also be, kind of passing the love out, right? And giving people in frontline positions a living wage where they're happy, where they don't need to supply themselves with a secondary or even a third job to make ends meet. So that would be lovely, but I'm not holding my breath on that one.
Yeah. Well, I guess that would also be a way of, making the industry more of like, okay, I've got a long-term vision for having a career in this, and not, just a stepping stone to something else. It's interesting also what you said about, the privacy concerns. I think like with that conundrum, it's like people, as long as like that level of personalization or what is done with the data is used properly, then it's like, relinquishing that information is not an issue. But the issue then comes if if it's a bit invasive or random and not, done effectively. I don't know. What would you say would be like this? This is a question I've asked a few people, and it's always interesting to get the different perspectives on this. But what would you say would be an effective way to kind of balance that? Because I do see, like some companies do it well in terms of delivering sort of that personalized experience, but then others, it's really, the data is like mismanaged in a way that then it's irritating, or it's like, okay, that seems a bit invasive now, like what the heck, so what would be your advice to kind of balance that so that people are not so concerned about relinquishing their data and actually feel happy with like, okay, this is, actually giving me something in return of what I want and what my preferences are?
Well, I think it's as simple as asking them. We tend to try to get all our information technologically now in order to drive that, right? So So, for example, I stay in a hotel and this is the type of room I always use or the type of bed I always ask for, et cetera, et cetera. So when I go online, that's what I'm going to be fed. That's pretty rudimentary. I don't drink, but many, many times I go in there, there's a bottle of wine saying welcome. It's like, what the hell? So I think we have to ask our guests. It's not hard. It's like, do you want, yes, there's a little button at the bottom to, do you want to subscribe to this newsletter or not? But I think there's a way for us to ask our guests properly about how they want to be dealt with. And it's not via a survey. It's via, something that's tailored just for them as a guest and gives them the capability to fill out, we can let people fill out long form statements and pull out the analysis of that information and apply it directly to personalization quite effectively, or we can have them say yes, no to certain questions. But I think the first thing is asking our guests what they want and then implementing that effectively. Yeah, sometimes we'll try to find the short route and we may not do as well as we should. We may deliver the wrong results, but we'll learn from those mistakes pretty quickly, at least in this day and age. But I really believe that, and it all goes back to the philosophy of delivering authentic hospitality. And if you do that, then the likelihood of somebody responding to something that you're asking them for is going to be heightened versus somebody getting a survey. We send out surveys all the time to people and we never ask them, or we never tell them we're going to give them anything for it. So what's the good in it, right? Why do I want to respond to the survey? What's in it for me?
Yeah.
If, am I going to get a free cup of coffee at Starbucks? Okay, maybe I'm more inclined. But at the same time, if I'm told that the next time I arrive at ABC Hotel, I can expect this level of service based upon my answers, that's a pretty good incentive to respond. But then you got to meet those, right? That's tricky. But at the same time, I think we need to ask people. We need to interact with them and not just try to gather our information through technological means.
Yeah, and I guess it goes to your point of, the more data, the better, and the more the customer, and even in terms of differentiating yourself and maybe in terms of optimizing your direct business, for example. Okay, what do our guests actually want, and let me create like offers that actually incentivize this because it's distinguishable from the other channel, even if it's maybe not as cheap as like a third party or something like that. So
for sure,
totally agree with that assessment. And kind of looking, I guess, as well to sort of the trends in terms of thinking about marketing and stuff, and how the guest segments and things are changing. And we spoke about this a little bit earlier in this episode about, I guess, more Gen Z, like the rise of Gen Z travelers, and then also, that use increasingly more like their mobile devices and stuff to make bookings. They get their inspiration and stuff from like social media. It's kind of maybe shifting a bit from more traditional booking channels and so on. In your opinion, like what would you say hotels should consider to kind of make the most of that demand, and how it's kind of turning in that direction, and choosing different channels, I guess, to plan their trips and get their inspiration?
I think hotels need to dive into it head first, because of the fact that, people are utilizing their mobile device for virtually everything. So you need to be a mobile first organization. It doesn't matter if you're a hotel or a multinational, you need to be mobile first. And that includes everything from the operations perspective all the way through how you interface with the guest. And then the different channels. It's been a while since I've been in that game, but I do know that you can now expose, inventory or offers online through different channels that you wouldn't have thought of before, like Facebook, like TikTok, like others. It's really interesting though. When I look at, and I always look at technology from my son's perspective because he's 20. So the way he even does school assignments on his phone, it drives me crazy, right? But that's kind of what he does, and it's normal for him. And when he goes to learn about things, it's primarily YouTube, is where he's gathering his knowledge from. It's not from Wikipedia, it's not from a news site, it's YouTube. So there's a huge audience there. But then I also look at my wife, who's the same age as I am, which is older, who sits on the couch when I'm watching football and she doesn't want to, which is she's nice enough to let me watch football. She's sitting there looking at TikTok videos of our upcoming trip and what to do in Florence, right? Yeah. So yes, demographically it's a younger audience, but at the same time you're still going to gather interest from older demographics, because there are a segment of older demographics that know how to use a mobile device just as well as a 16-year-old, or a 5-year-old for that matter. So I think you need to be everywhere. I think independent hotels also need to expose their inventory on channels that they wouldn't have thought about, like the local DMO channel. If they have the capability to do that, and if DMOs are spending money effectively on the visibility of that destination, then exposing your inventory on that channel is going to be lower than it would be on an OTA. And if you get in business from that, great. It shows once again that you're creating that sense of community through that channel. And once again, if you give them the greatest hospitality on property, the likelihood of them going direct is going to be increased. But even if they go through a secondary channel such as a DMO or even a CVB, then that makes sense. But yeah, the investment in having the right person on your team to go ahead and help you analyze social and social's impact on your business is going to be key. I'm not that person, but there are people out there that can definitely do that and help hoteliers really thrive on those channels.
And I guess also an important thing would be knowing which channels to kind of really invest. And I mean, I know there's I guess applications or systems out there where you can kind of have a more consolidated social media strategy. But having said that, social media platforms have different, I don't know, I guess different ways that are effective. Like Twitter, is so you have to be on it, at least tweet like three times a day, which sometimes maybe that doesn't really, are my guests on Twitter, or, kind of exactly. Looking at those different things. So,
and to that, asking the guest for permission once again is kind of that thing, in a reg form, whether it's online or whether it's handwritten upon arrival, which still occurs. You can have lines there for what is my Twitter handle, what's my LinkedIn handle, you can ask guests for that. And maybe if you ask them, you'll give them something for it, right? And so now you can kind of start creating that community as well. It amazes me that hotel companies, independent or otherwise, don't advertise on LinkedIn. It is the cheapest way to advertise, and they don't do it. And you think it's business people on LinkedIn primarily, right? That's a crap load of travelers just sitting there within a very cool ecosystem that I have yet to see a hotel company, big or small, advertise. And I post that I was in Munich last week. I was in Prague the week before. I post this stuff. And so the algorithm, if I go ahead and do this right, from going ahead and posting an ad on LinkedIn, could target me because they see me as a traveler. Doesn't happen. So I think that is the next channel that hotels, at least, business hotels should be targeting for sure, or hotels within central business districts, etc. They should be utilizing that channel, and I haven't seen anybody do that yet. And it's cheap.
And do you see kind of, I guess, like our industry, because I know like certain industries like retail and so on, there's kind of this social commerce kind of move, I guess, with, people being able to actually do transactions like on the channels directly, like as a channel. Do you see that kind of evolving in the next few years? And like, where would hotels fit into that, or even the wider industry? And how would that play out in your view?
Oh yeah, I think definitely all the online channels, the social channels will be 100% commerce based. At some point, at least from a hotelier's perspective, they'll be able to, throw up everything that they do on a regular OTA in those channels and use them as a not only a visibility channel but also a commerce based channel for sure. Um, we're going to change how we interact on a commercial level. Right now, banking does it, retail does it, Amazon does it. So with my previous firm before I jumped back in with Infor, it was a B2B kind of client marketing company, primarily in the tech space. But we got a lot of our knowledge and a lot of our ideas from just looking at the retail segment. Because we tend to follow that pretty closely as a business, as an industry. So yeah, I think that's definitely going to come very, very swiftly. And once again, it's going to be, okay, what channels are most prolific for me? And am I getting the most opportunity, profit, et cetera, out of those channels, utilizing the data that we kind of envisage, et cetera, et cetera. But for sure. And there will be people like me that will call the hotel every once in a while.
Yeah. And I guess it would be interesting to see, like, once, I guess more hotels like get on that sort of commerce direction or commerce path, like seeing how the algorithms as well, like use the data of like, okay, you booked this previously. Okay, now we're going to recommend this for you and that for you and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So that would be very interesting to see for sure.
It'll be very, very cool to see how all that interacts with each other. And, the more data, the better chance you have of getting it right. But it's still garbage in, garbage out. So, if I'm in Munich last week and I was in Munich on business, but the algorithm says, okay, because Alan posted a picture of being in Munich, he had to be at Oktoberfest, so we're going to send him beer ads, right? That's not going to work. So it'll get to a point where it gets better and better. But once again, if the algorithm slips up just once, it can, give you some pretty good garbage, as we've seen with the implementation of GPTs throughout the planet and the hallucinations they give us. Supposedly, I ran a big company in the US as part of my bio when I checked myself on ChatGPT once. And no, I never did that. So it's pretty funny.
I've never actually checked my.
Well, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
ChatGPT.
Type in your name, and it gives you back some pretty interesting results.
I'll do that, and I'll give some feedback if there's any interesting insights that I did in my things I did in my sleep that I don't remember.
Exactly right.
But actually, kind of tying it in with AI, like, how do you see AI sort of continuing to infiltrate those new channels? Like, let's pick social medias, for example. I know, like, there's now the capabilities, if you're doing a post, for example, you can use AI to craft, the outline of your post and stuff. But like, in terms of I guess the searching experience, if you're searching for something, or do you see that kind of technology infiltrating that space more and more? And
ChatGPT is one of the best search engines out there if you're willing to take it at face value. Sometimes it'll deliver something that's a little bit off kilter, but for sure, ChatGPT is a search engine. If you want to use it that way, it's pretty awesome. We internally have our own GPT engine that queries everything inside the walls of Infor. So it's really great from a business optimization standpoint. I no longer have to send an email to somebody who I don't know to try to gather a document or something. I can just ask our internal GPT to do that for me. So yeah, I think the advancements and adoption of AI will be seen everywhere. The challenge, as you know, being in charge of content, the challenge really is to ensure that that content is still genuine in nature. So you can ask a GPT to go ahead and write you something terrific, but does it sound like you? And you can say, well, no, I want that a little more toned down, or I want, it'll get to a point where you're happy with it, but you still need to layer in your own stuff and your own historical relevance, if you want to call it that, so people know that it's you or me. But hotels can leverage it exponentially, to come up with some pretty incredible flowery language for a hotel room. They can do that to the nth degree, but once again, they've got to, face value. Does it look like you said it looked like? Does it, is it genuine in nature? So those are pretty cool. But yeah, it's already there. It's just if people are willing to adopt it, yeah, to be honest, it's everywhere. It really is everywhere. It's weird. And then you have the dark side of it, right? You could get somebody that could build an algorithm that could target your hotel if they had a bad stay, and if they were smart enough, they could start posting crap out there and just have it grow and grow and grow. Or they could post a picture of your hotel utilizing AI to make it look like it's a dump, right? So there are some scary elements of it out there as well, right? I've never seen so many pictures of dogs from Ohio ever in my life that have been computer generated over the last 2 weeks, from what a candidate in the US said about that. So, it's pretty wild what it can do.
Yeah. And I guess, I mean, it's a little scary too sometimes, like just seeing how much more, and I know like before, seeing like an AI generated video or a deep fake, it was easy to pinpoint like, oh, okay, that looks fake. It doesn't, but it's getting more and more fine tuned, like, and sometimes it's hard to distinguish between, and to your, I sort of looking at like the generational perspective, like the digital natives, as it were, that are so tuned on with these devices and the technology as it is now. Sometimes it's hard for them to even distinguish like what's real and what's not. I see this with my nieces and stuff sometimes as well, where it's like we're watching, a certain animation or something like that, and it's like, oh no, that looked real. No, okay, no, that was CGI probably, so it's kind of it's interesting to it's a concern, but I guess
there's a company out there that supposedly is doing such a good job of AI generated images of an individual, where they plant over, the only your facial movements are all pretty awesome, and it will talk in your voice. And they're now saying it'll be like something you can put on Zoom. It'll answer questions, right? It's like, how crazy is that? You can be off playing a round of golf and your Zoom avatar is sitting there taking all your calls. So who knows, right?
But I guess going back to that point, and I liked what you said about, because even with Google and stuff, with the the SEO changes that they've made and things like that, even with here alone, like the quality and originality of the content that you're putting out, it's going to be a ranking factor. So it's like you can't just generate something and then like put it out into the universe. It's like you have to have some kind of subject matter expertise, or some layer of information that is going to distinguish you from the rest. Otherwise,
exactly,
what's the point?
100%.
And in what other ways, I guess, do you see like AI continuing to impact our industry? And I guess for hotel, because I know like the OTAs and sort of the bigger players, I guess, in hospitality, they adopt these things. They tend to do it quicker, but like for independent hotels specifically, like what areas do you see independent hotels increasingly adopting AI? Like what areas of their business would they see it as adding the most value?
I think at automation, right? back office automation, stuff that mundane tasks, things that people don't really need to be doing, and they could extricate themselves out of that level of mundaneness for sure. And then operationally, at least not operationally, but from a visibility perspective, I think you'll be able to have AI do some pretty cool things there. And then AI will be your chatbot. They do a pretty good job. They're not perfect yet, but if you give them a certain set of criteria in which to respond to, they're pretty good at it. So, they get blown away when you ask them what your favorite color is, but other than that, they can answer some pretty good questions. So, I think that level of AI will be pretty cool from a customer support or customer interaction perspective for sure. But yeah, I don't have all the answers, that's for sure, because it's so cool, and it's happening so fast. But I do believe that we have huge areas of opportunity ahead of us, and AI will definitely be a part of it. The revenue management landscape is full of it. Be careful that you're not buying revenue management systems that just wrap themselves in AI that weren't built from the ground up, because they're still using some pretty rudimentary platforms in the background. But other than that, yeah, AI and revenue management were made for each other.
Yeah, I
So,
guess. Yeah, for me personally, and I don't know who would agree or not, but like where it would add the most value is, yeah, to your point, eliminating those kind of repetitive or like not so interesting functions or or tasks and stuff. So it's like, and I think this was a little bit of a, when Chat GPT kind of blew up, it was like, okay, now, is it pushing out, writers or content, creators or artists and
yeah.
things like that, and for me, like creativity and these kind of things, it's my number one passion is that, so it's like, I want the AI to do the stuff that, if it could do my laundry and clean my house and could it do that,
Yeah,
so I can have time to do these things that I wanted to.
exactly. I hear you.
But
We're
yeah.
ways away yet, but it'll happen.
Yeah. But even like I would argue also, like I did have this concern initially of how it would impact sort of the creative fields, but I do think there will always be that value for that uniqueness and that unique voice, and also I guess knowing how to use those systems in a way that,
Yeah,
the not so fun part of content creation is automatic,
exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. So we're actually kind of coming to the end of our time, although there was sort of one trend that I just wanted to touch on quickly just before we wrap
Okay.
things up. And so with sustainability kind of becoming increasingly important, and I think there was it was a background issue, but then the pandemic kind of brought it into more of a focus. But now that things are, it's business as usual kind of again,
Yeah.
and there was the pent up demand and all of those things. How do you kind of see this continuing to develop for hotels specifically, but also like for the wider industry? How will technology sort of, I guess, make a more sustainable industry? But then also, I think a challenge sometimes as well is like you hear, consumers, I think it was booking.com or something that did a survey that, there was a big percentage of consumers that want to travel more sustainably. But then it's
Yeah.
like, are they actually, you say that, but are you doing that? And then how can like the businesses in hospitality, but then also the consumers kind of work together to have a more sustainable industry, but then still have those experiences that they want, and and so on and so forth.
Sustainability starts. I know that I've heard this before, and I was lucky enough to teach college the last few years on sustainability and tourism. Um, but sustainability starts at the top. It doesn't start with humans. It starts at corporations getting their act together. Um, So take, for example, the largest hotel company on the planet. The largest hotel company on the planet, their average footprint, average number of keys is about 100, and their buildings are big and square. And they take up quite a bit of land, and most of that land is parking lot. However, they have probably 100,000 square feet on the roof. It's probably not that much, but let's say 40,000 square feet on the roof that they could lay solar panels down tomorrow. But they don't do that, and they don't do that on even new builds. So sustainability should not be pushed down to the consumer. In my humble estimation, the consumer needs to hold the corporations to task. And so if you find a hotel that's doing it right, that actually has the capability, or you see the fact that they're doing things that will affect change, then stay with them. If you believe the hype of some hotel companies that say they're doing it, and yes, they don't, and yet they don't show it, then that's a problem. That's if we all moved our dollars to people that were doing the right thing, those that weren't would start doing the right thing. Once again, it's not hard, but we tend to go the other way because maybe the room is $20 cheaper or whatever. So I really believe that if a hotel wants to do it, it has to lead by example. So it has to be able to show the guest what they're doing, not just tell them. So whether it's through video content or whether it's through, hey, listen, this is what we're doing for the community. For example, 30% of all fresh produce at grocery stores in Canada is thrown out daily. Why is it thrown out? It's thrown out because it doesn't look right. It's not the fact that it doesn't taste right. So if there was a hotel company that said, listen, we're using this and we're doing meals for the homeless in the area, that's part of sustainability. Sustainability is not just environmental. If you look at the UN Sustainability Development Goals, there are 17 of them, and one of them is poverty, eradicating poverty. One of them is eradicating hunger. One is about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So sustainability en masse is about people. And so you don't necessarily have to have solar roofs, but then you also have to show, okay, well, this is what I'm doing for the community in which my hotel is located. So it's a very broad brushstroke. And so I think what hotels or hoteliers need to do is to pick one thing and do it really, really well. And then prove or show the guests that they're doing it really, really well. You don't have to do everything. Just do one thing well. If we all did one thing really well, we'd probably be a lot better off. So that would be my take.
I totally agree. And I think going back to kind of like the differentiations and stuff with independent hotels, I've seen some independent hotels do this really well in terms of how they position their whole brand. Everything is built around like this core principle of like, okay, we only source, we have like gardens where we source
Right.
like our fresh produce, and then we only get like other produce from like local providers, nothing from like supermarkets or big, providers and things like that. So yeah, it's interesting to see, I guess, and with sustainability being quite an abstract concept with all the 17 or, objectives and then the pillars and this and that, like simplifying it by narrowing it down to one area of focus is definitely seems like the way to go.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
exactly.
Cool. So yeah, we're kind of out of time now, but just one last question before we go, which I ask everybody. It's always interesting to see. What are you, as we kind of approach now the new year, like what are you looking forward to the most for our industry and why?
Boy. Well, I think I probably articulated it. I think I'm looking forward to implementing technology into the framework and extricating it all at the same time. So giving people exactly what they need in order to run their business, but making sure that it's not cumbersome. at all. And so I think that's what I'm excited about in the future for hospitality, is giving them technology, but letting them run their business without technology running their business, and making that more of an enabler rather than something that they have to do. So I think that's kind of where my excitement level is. And then, as I've always said, the joys of our industry is we get to travel. So, that to me is the best education in the world. If people get a chance to travel, they're going to learn more in 2 weeks of travel than they will in a year of grade school. So I really believe that for those of us in the industry, and it's very, very hard for the frontline employees because they don't get paid that perfect wage. But if they get a chance and there's a way for people to do it, they should embrace travel and go do it, because it's part of our DNA. So that is always what I look forward to moving forward, is where are we going next?
Yeah, definitely keeps its variety, learning new cultures and new
For sure.
people and experiences, and variety is this, the spice of life. It keeps things interesting. So
Yep.
definitely can agree with that. So thank you again very much for joining us on this episode. I really learned a lot from you in terms of, especially, I guess, like how the way the industry is going in terms of like making smarter collation and use of the data, and how that would kind of intersect with service and delivering a better service to guests and to consumers at large. So thank you very much for that. I'm sure our listeners learned a lot as well. And thank you everyone for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you so very much. It's been a pleasure.